Can you guys hear me? Sweet, thanks.
All right. Have a seat. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Like to call this regular council meeting to order at 3:30 p.m. on September 21st. Council would like to acknowledge the Akula That, on whose traditional territories the district of Akula operates, and a notice of video recording. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing no late items, move along to approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second, but I thought we were going to move 13 up before 12.
Okay, a motion to change the agenda to move 13.1, and we're going to move that prior to reports. So after our committee reports. Can I get a motion to move it with that change?
I'll move that with the change.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And approval of the minutes. No minutes. And any unfinished business? Seeing no unfinished business. Moving to the mayor's announcements. The mayor is not here today. You'll notice I'm not Mako. He is over today in Atatsu. It's Ukulu that day, so he's over there enjoying and sharing some time with our neighbors. I would like to take a moment to recognize that we won't meet again until after September 30th, which is Truth and Reconciliation Day. And just that over the next week or so, we take some time to think about what that means to us and where we live and our community and our neighbors. And having said that, we'll move into public input. This is an opportunity for members of the public to provide input. It's not an opportunity to provide input about matters that have already been subject to the public hearing. If you're attending via Zoom, please raise your hand icon to speak. And if you are attending by telephone, please hit *9. If there are any members of the audience who wish to speak, so first we'll start with the Zoom.
There are no hands up on Zoom.
No hands up on Zoom. And are there any members of the audience that wish to speak? Not seeing any. And Joey, are there any members of the public that wish to speak by Zoom or telephone?
No one via Zoom has their hands up at this time.
And have we received any emails to communityinput@ucluit.ca?
No, we have not.
All right, moving right along. So delegations, we have 3 delegations this afternoon. And if you could please keep your presentation to 10 minutes. The time limit may be extended by council resolution. I'm sure you'll be fine. Members of the council may ask questions at the end of each presentation, although council will not be making any decisions at this time. So our first delegation, we have Dr. Carrie Marshall and Faye Massar from Coastal Family Resource Coalition with our harm reduction delegation. Faye, you're going to be presenting?
Yeah.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Carrie's going to join on Zoom.
Excellent.
In a minute or two.
Excellent. Jen, can you hear everything fine? Excellent.
Awesome. Let me just adjust the microphone. Perfect. Does this work? Okay. Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Faye Massar. I'm the community developer for the Coastal Family Resource Coalition, and shortly we'll be joined by Dr. Carrie Marshall via Zoom. And I'm here to talk about the local harm reduction priorities for our region and the work of to date of our harm reduction working group. And thank you to Councillor Cole for the invitation to present. We did a similar presentation to District Tofino a couple months ago. So start off with a bit of intro. The Coalition is a regional interdisciplinary network of health and frontline service providers that work to develop capacity in addressing the needs of children, youth, families, and communities, and to improve communications between service providers, agencies, communities, and funders working in the region. Our overall goal is to improve health in our communities. It was formed in the early 2000s as a response to provincial funding cuts made to almost all human service sectors and the resultant reduction of service in our West Coast communities. Local service providers saw the potential for conflict and competition, so they instead decided to work together to secure the services we need, make the most of what we have, and to act on what we know about our communities. And hence the Coalition was born. Let's see, should probably advance slides. Maybe. Yeah, let's try the next slide, please. Thank you. Point up, okay. Or I'm going to try the tip from Joy. Next slide, please. No. Okay. Failing that, I'll just keep talking. It's okay. It's really just what I'm saying, so you guys could just listen too. So monthly meetings are held from September until June in alternating communities. Right now, we're meeting still over Zoom to provide an opportunity to network, share resources, and reduce service delivery duplication. You may recognize me also from the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust, where I'm the Director of Community Health. The CBT is the administrative and fiscal host for the Coalition. And although they're distinct, the Coalition's a network, CBT is a charitable organization and a funding organization in the region. We do share many goals, namely healthy community development for our region. Let's see. Yeah, and we facilitate knowledge sharing and exchange, and we work together on Coming Together Forum, the Living Wage, and our Vital Signs report. Where am I? Yeah, I did it. So we have several working groups at the Coalition, one of which is the Harm Reduction Working Group, which is why I'm here today. It was established in 2017 in response to the BC overdose crisis, which is now referred to as a toxic drug supply crisis, which is more of a harm reduction spin on it. Our early meetings really did focus on the regional overdose risk, making sure the communities are prepared and local needs will be met, figuring out how we're going to distribute naloxone and support and set up education and training for frontline service providers, as well as in not just in the health and social service sector, but in the tourism sector as well. It's a dynamic group, so that means it's not the same people every time. It's a growing group, and we meet around 3 or 4 times a year, or when a need is expressed, and we have membership from Island Health, Nitchchalmouth Tribal Council, Mental Health and Substance Use, community paramedicine, first responders, physicians, hospital staff, the health leads for the nations, and nonprofit organizations as well as community members that have an interest in harm reduction. This is an example of how we were trying to say, you can go get naloxone for free at these places and receive training. So we put these posters in all 9 communities with local information for each community. It's an early initiative. Oh God, okay, here we go. Let's go way back. It's just foreshadowing as to what's to come. Okay, so in 2018, we shifted our focus to focus more generally on harm reduction. Harm reduction is a public health approach that aims to reduce harms related to substance use. Harm reduction includes many options and approaches. It may include abstinence. However, quitting all substance use isn't required before receiving care. It meets people wherever they are in their substance use journey. And evidence shows that harm reduction does not increase or encourage substance use, which is a common myth. Harm reduction strategies and services can lessen the consequences associated with substance use. It may include access to safer sex and safer substance use supplies and or take-home naloxone, for example. It also involves outreach and support programs and referrals to health and support services. Harm reduction helps ensure services are non-judgmental and available to all. It treats people with respect. It helps people connect with others and develop healthy relationships. and it involves working directly with people and their communities. Oh, great. Hi, Carrie. Just, if you need an update, Carrie, I'm just struggling to change the slide. Next slide, please. Well, what I'm going to talk about next is that in 2018, the Long Beach chapter of Divisions of Family Practice hosted, and which Carrie is the physician lead for, hosted a substance use summit in the spring of 2018. And at that summit, alcohol was identified as a top substance use of concern. And, oh, here we go. Perfect. And that has led to some current work on getting a sobering assessment site and an at-home detox program locally in the region. Other priority, and I'll touch more on alcohol, and Carrie will for sure. Other priorities that have come up at our working group have been, in the last year and a half, have been harm reduction education and supports for youth around substance use, sexual consent, and safe sex. We have a few professional development days and student days planned for this November with our child and youth mental health team working group that also have an interest in harm reduction. We sort of have this hybrid committee forming now. In general, a peer-to-peer approach is a priority for our region, which means people with lived experience of substance use and helping others and really meeting people where they're at. Another one is emergency housing for youth and wraparound harm reduction supports. Right now, we have no real crisis housing available for youth, no formal arrangement made. There's lots of informal arrangements that are happening off the side of people's desks and supported by local families, but a concerted effort around that is needed. Also, timely funding for transportation of clients to treatment outside of the region. So we have a lot of service providers that have expressed they have clients who are already presenting with readiness to receive treatment, but then there's gaps in availability of getting funding from whichever agency that client would be appropriate for them to then get transported from the region to Nanaimo, Vancouver, wherever it might be. And then that gap could be up to several months, apparently, means that person doesn't receive access timely care. An initiative we've set up that's a very, very small Band-Aid initiative for that is one of our funders through Coalition is the BC Community Response Network. They've given us vouchers that can be used at TGH through Whistle vouchers, the taxi service, to not only transport patients home that need a safe way home within the region, but if someone was presenting with needing to get outside the region for treatment, they could access that fund as well. But that will dry up and we'll need a long-term solution. Let's see if I can go to the next one. Here's like a little data on alcohol use and harms, because this is more of the salient topic. So here we go. In Tofino on the West Coast, alcohol use contributes to 80% of RCMP calls, 50% of ambulance calls, and 20% of presentations to the ER at TGH. That came from the DOT's municipal alcohol policy. Our regional, so this also includes Port Alberni, annual per capita liquor consumption has gone up quite significantly, 13% since 2002. And then more locally in Akula in 2020, alcohol violations made up 14% of all bylaw infractions. So this is just an example of how the risk of substance use goes beyond the individual to families and the community at large. There's many social harms related to substance use, alcohol use, loss of public space, crime, public safety, family breakdown, etc., increased enforcement and policing costs. Municipalities are a key partner in creating a collaborative approach to community health, and this is successful implementation of evidence-informed strategies. They have an important role to play in regards to influencing healthy public policy that can then influence the health of individuals. something that an actionable item that could happen, that did happen to our neighbors in Tofino, is the development of municipal alcohol policy. I just put it up there as something for you to consider. Provided a supplemental information page that has some tips about creating a map and the benefit of it. But really, it's what it is it's a tool that will align with the provincial liquor laws and then creates more specific laws at the municipal level, outlining the appropriate use of alcohol on municipally owned land and like parks, beaches, and also for events. It's to kind of shift the culture, change the social norms in the community around binge drinking to more of an encourage a moderate, responsible alcohol consumption. This is extremely important in a town with a strong tourism economy, because tourist industry interests have often successfully argued for policies that result in a wider general availability of alcohol in the society, and provision for tourists has often served as an entry point in the society, increasing consumption levels, particularly among young people working within the tourism sector, which I know a lot of our young people, that's their first job is in the tourist sector. And then another thing that I thought of saying, just putting it out there as a gentle suggestion, would be from a preventative standpoint, more increasing the youth programming, youth coordinator roles. And the last time I checked in, it was still a part-time role, and budget was fairly low for the youth. I think especially in a rural and remote youth are more likely to use substances than youth living in urban areas. They're more likely to engage in risky behavior. They're more likely to get into a car with someone that's been drinking, or drink and drive themselves. There's more risk in a rural area just because there's less youth. I don't think that's a strong enough rationale. Not that that was your rationale, but just don't think that's a good reason, enough reason to have a part-time allotment for that. So I'm just putting that out there as well. I think that's all I have prepared to talk about. Let's just see. Here we go. Yes, that's all I had prepared. But Carrie, maybe you want to elaborate on some things that I mentioned, or field a bunch of questions?
Sure. Do you want to take questions, or you want me to just add?
I think an update around the alcohol stuff would be great.
Sure. I think I don't have the stats, but anecdotally, it's been a very busy summer in many ways. Just in general, the emergency room in August, we had 900 visits, so that's about 30 a day. Our previous record was last year was 746, I think. So we had a 20% increase in ER visits over the summer. And like you said, about 18 to 20% of those traditionally have involved alcohol use. I think there's lots of anecdotes over the summer too, lots of car accidents involving alcohol use. So I think my point is to just draw attention to the statistics and the data for the West Coast, is that we have a significantly higher burden of problematic alcohol use, including, risk to individual and acts through, medical risk through liver disease. As a side note to that, we have had maybe 6 patients in the last 6 months or so, young patients, die of overt alcohol use through liver failure, which is like nothing that I have seen in my career before. I'm sure COVID and isolation have played a part in that. But it's alarming enough that I'm working with the medical health officer to look into it more. So there's risk to self medically. There's risk around accidents. There's risk to others, community, family. I think we all know these things. So my point in this has always been to point out that we have a significantly higher burden of alcohol misuse on the coast. I think you had that stat that comes from public health compared to the province, and yet we still continue to have no single resource directed towards alcohol use on the coast. We did have a drug and substance use counselor through VHA here for about the last 6 months. She has now left. That position is vacant. We have advocated for years to get a sobering and assessment center going. So that is a place where people are acutely intoxicated, where they don't need to be on the street or in cells or in a hospital, to try and relieve some of the burden on those systems, which are very expensive and also not appropriate for this use. Probably for 5 years, myself and others have been working on that, including Faye, that essentially was approved through the province, and we are waiting for this. This is not really public knowledge, but we're waiting for all this, bureaucratic funding and sequence of steps that need to happen. But likely, it will not happen because there's no space. That's more of a Tofino thing than a Ukluit thing, but it would serve the entire region. So there's literally no real estate that would be appropriate for this. So again, don't put that outside of this, but that is we're still waiting on the final word on that, but that's where I see that's going. There's some great conversations with Waya Point around residential or long-term treatments that I think that are being fleshed out. There's no detox center. We still, at any given time, admit people for alcohol detox, which is just something that we've done historically at the hospital. There's probably at any given time 2 to 4 patients admitted for detox. Sometimes we have to say no to that because the hospital's too full. So again, there's just, I will admit that I drank. I'm not asking people to be sober, but the idea of increasingly liberal alcohol laws here just don't match up with the pattern of use that we have on the coast. And I think until we have more services and until we have a significant change in social norms around how alcohol is consumed on the coast, I would be remiss to be advocating for any of those policies. Also, the municipal alcohol policy that was initiated in Tofino a couple of years ago, the range of that, or the what that policy actually affects is not a huge amount of things. It's basically limiting or banning alcohol use on municipal property. So one of the big examples in Tofino was a Canada Day fundraising event where alcohol was sold at the skate park. It was part of the Canada Day, and somewhat ironically enough, it was raising money for children's park and rec programs. And it ended up being quite out of hand. The police had to get involved. The police were highly outnumbered because of the amount of the rowdiness of the crowd. So anyway, that was something going forward that is included in the policy, that the municipality would no longer be using alcohol-related events for fundraising. So some things like that, again, part of that shifting of social norms, that things raising money for parks and rec and family events, just looking at the image and optics of that, of using alcohol to raise money for those things. So that, I think the process of going through that with the Tofino municipality, including Councilman Steer, was quite involved in that. I think that was a really valuable process for council to go through and for the district staff to go through in developing it. Again, it doesn't have a huge reach, but it's just part of the larger puzzle. Those are the updates that I have from my end, but I'm happy to answer people's questions.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you for that. That was really, really interesting, actually. So those vacant positions, are they still open, or have you lost funding for those positions?
The position is open. The drug and alcohol counseling position actually just opened, or just was created probably within the last year. I will say Deb Botting and NTC do have some of those positions, but Deb Botting is one of the drug and alcohol counselors for First Nations communities, but there's a lot of turnover and just challenges with continuity as well. So I think that position is open now, that the person that was in it left maybe 3 weeks ago now.
So the naloxone train, are you still doing that training and giving out the free kits?
Yeah.
Fame that better.
Various organizations like Community Paramedicine can do naloxone training. So right now, it's not an organized event. We just have information going out through the coalition newsletter, and upon request of like who you can connect with. Margareta Posevich at the Mental Health Substance Use office here in Akula is. Or Rochelle would be your local go-tos.
I mean, on the coast, so naloxone is used for opioid overdoses. I mean, we have not traditionally had a lot of opioid use on the coast. There's kind of an interesting phenomenon I've observed in reverse on the downtown east side. Opioids and alcohol use don't tend to go together. People tend to choose one or the other. Anyway, alcohol seems much more prevalent on the coast, is much more prevalent than opioids, although I think that will change with time. There have been a few overdoses in the last year. Those have been people that have overdosed in Port Alberni or been from Port Alberni here. I think that's particularly relevant for the Hitatsu folks. There's quite a strong connection between them and Port Alberni. And that tends to be where the overdoses are coming from.
Jen or Marilyn, do you have any?
The Tofino bylaw about not drinking in public places, they've now got, is it a policy that they aren't going to serve alcohol at fundraising events? Is that a policy, or is that part of that bylaw?
So they have the municipal alcohol policy that then connects with bylaws, and you can read the whole policy right on their website. But it limit no alcohol at family events and the fundraising, as well as it also included like there's no announcement of a last call. So at events where alcohol will be served, on municipal lands or facilities, there will be like no announcement of last call. So that's not going to encourage like a big rush to the front to get like 6 drinks, So stuff like that is, I can't remember exactly. Those are the main points, but you can read the whole policy, and then you can cater it. There's a lot of guides, like toolkits, how to develop a map, and then it's sort of catered to, you can cater it to your community. The Tofino one's a nice start, I would say. I agree with Carrie about it doesn't reach super far, but the family events is interesting. I thought about how that would relate and be clueless, and I thought of Yuki days. Could you imagine dry Yuki days?
Exactly what I was just thinking.
That's what we were thinking, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not drinking in public, I think is not legal, but so the policy technically is just around municipal events, like things at the community center, or again, the Canada Day celebrations in the park downtown. However, in order to get alcohol event licensing, that has to go through the police. And so what the Tofino RCMP have done is applied the same principles. They've taken the municipal alcohol policy around things like no last call, those kind of things. And in order to get your event license privately, which a lot of this part of the policy wouldn't cover if they're private events, there are parts of that municipal policy that the RCMP have taken into alcohol event licensing in general.
Jen, did you have anything you'd like to? You're up.
Thank you. new tech, trying to figure out the new computer for Zooming. Thank you for the work, Faye and Carrie. I'm actually quite interested in working on an alcohol policy. I think it's long overdue in our town. I was looking at the resource guide that was in the notes that we were given with the agenda, but it comes up as a non-existent site. So there might be a different resource that you guys have that I would love to get my hands on and take a look at and work on. I don't have a specific question. I have to say that the stats are horrible. Just horrible.
Yeah, they are. And it was there's a couple other things I would add too. There's a very big emotional challenge, I think, from a hospital perspective. I would extend that to paramedics and our CMP if I can speak with them too about the ongoing. It feels relentless, the amount of pain and suffering that goes along with alcohol use on the West Coast. And, it's a challenging spot for you guys to be in because I can imagine what the backlash would be about, say, no alcohol at UT days, but I think what the municipal alcohol policy is a good, even if you don't end up doing anything formally, it's a good exercise to go through to see what a mismatch this is, and to really understand what the role of leadership is in a town to understand how these social norms in sort of the ongoing enabling of alcohol misuse contributes to this. The other thing is there are lots and lots of people that struggle with this that try to be sober or, try to make those choices. And I think, by having an event with open alcohol added, especially a family event, I think that can be challenging for people that are trying to attend something with their family with a lot of triggers. And I think, again, the question is if you have a family event on the West Coast, do you need to have alcohol as part of that? Is that a healthy image to be reflecting to families, teenagers, more vulnerable people at risk? Again, it's not, I drink myself, it's not to say that people shouldn't be drinking alcohol, but again, I just really want to make the point that there is just a massive gap in use versus support. And if anybody is out there that have had family members try to find support for this issue, it's really pretty heartbreaking.
Thank you, Carrie. I have a few sort of random all over the place thoughts. First of all, that page 5 through 28 of our agenda, this information, the way it is laid out is really informative. So if anybody hasn't looked at it yet, it is in our agenda. And I remember our very first harm reduction meeting. It seems like a long time ago. And it was soon after that we realized that, like Carrie said, the narcotics isn't our big issue out here. And I can remember back in the day fishing at the fish pond at Yuki Days, being very small and everybody cocktailing, and I don't even know if things were gardened then. I mean, I know we've come to a place now where we're not segregating in the garden, and I think that is part and parcel of, a step forward. And I think I'll probably might have the door locked on me when I get home. But I remember thinking before we didn't have Yuki Days with COVID and such, that back when I was at the fish pond, I know mayor and council were pouring the drinks behind in the beer garden ever since then. So that's 40 years ago. So it's been going on for a long time, and I just recognize that it's odd, and the more access to, the more usage and all of those things. And thank you for putting it together and presenting today, and lots to think about. And I would like it now, if we ask staff if we can bring this back and look at it and have a dialogue about it somehow. So I don't know how to make a motion. Yeah. You want to make one for me? Yeah.
I'll make a motion to bring this alcohol harm reduction information back to the table for discussion.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I don't know if we need to do that part. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate your time. Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks so much. And Jen, I can follow up with another, I know which link you're talking about, and I can follow up with a different resource. I'll send it to Joey or Paula.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Thanks,
Hey.
Carrie.
Bye, Carrie.
Right? It is strange. Thank you so much. And our second delegation, Sergeant Smith, you're up, sir. It's kind of a nice segue because when we think of the multi-agency meeting and we think about the harm reduction and some serious issues here on the coast that all the agencies are experiencing, it's nice to segue into your report.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Sorry, I don't have much better news going on from that, but I can definitely agree with the seriousness of alcohol on the coast and the issues stemming from that. Here in Ukilit as well, majority of our files are alcohol related, and so any work that we can do together to reduce the harm and develop opportunities to get people help that they need is great. So I'm new to the coast. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm the new sergeant. I came here 6 months ago already. Time is flying by. Yeah, I had all these great plans that I was going to do in the first 6 months, and I'm starting them now. So I can't wait for the rain to come, and then I can start these initiatives. A few of our stats. We are busier than ever. We're 20% higher than our highest file count ever. So we just had file 1,200 a couple days ago. So that's a lot for a 5-member detachment to handle that many files. So when you work that out, that's about 12 calls per 1,000 people in the community. Where we've seen huge increases is traffic complaints are up 32%. So that's speeding, road rage, alcohol-related crashes. Other threats files are up 42%. And I think that has to do with a lot of people are just tired and worn out. It's been a long go, and people have short fuses, which has led to quite a few threats and argument files. And then also fraud is on the rise. It's up 30%. Some positives. Property theft is down 4%. Mischief, which includes cause of disturbance, loud parties, things like that, is down 10%. And then assaults are down 19%. So those are positives. The initiatives that we're going to work on this year is one is traffic. Way we're working on that is we have Island District traffic enforcement coming once a month, and they spend a weekend here between the two communities doing traffic enforcement. I'm sure you've seen the large increase in police vehicles certain weekends. Some of their stats, they've removed 86 impaired drivers in 3 months, issued almost 200 violation tickets, and some like 1,000 warnings. And that is, their initiative is not to be hitting locals. They're going after the tourists, people visiting the coast. So they're not out in downtown looking for seatbelts. They're looking for impaired drivers, speeders, aggressive driving, unlicensed drivers, things like that. So hopefully it's been a positive on the community. We just received funding to continue that through the winter and revisit it back in April. So hopefully that'll continue. Also, we have water safety. We're going to be trying to be out on the water more often. We have this amazing vessel here, and it just floats there. So I'm trying to get it out on the water once a week, in very least the harbor. And that's been a very positive, reducing speed in the harbor and things like that. And then community relations, being part of the harm reduction groups, and working in the schools now that the schools are back up. That's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. I want to make sure that people know that we are actual people, that we have legs and can actually leave the police car. So you'll see us doing foot patrols. Please say hello. We're not necessarily out there to cause problems. We're just there to be visible to the community. And then also in schools, we're working with the high school to work sports and speak in the classes, in the law class, things like that. And then the last one is mental health. Two-part within the detachment, working on our mental health. It's been very straining and difficult on the members. Between the news, Facebook, just on the streets, it's very demanding on them. We work very long hours and at all hours of the night, and so we're making that a priority to make sure that my members are mentally healthy and can serve the public. And then also working with health services to work with people in town that are having mental health issues and struggles, that we can find them help and direct them in the right direction, and not have it to be 2 a.m. and trying to solve the issues when we can work out appointments and for people to meet. So that's it for me. We're fully staffed at the moment. There's only 5 of us. There's me, 3 general duty constables, and 1 Indigenous policing constable. So we look like we're going to be fully staffed for the foreseeable future, and so that's a good thing. I'm going to continue to work on getting more members. I think the last time we got an extra member was 1983. The town has changed just a little since then. So, and talking with Parks Canada, I think it is close to 2 million people visiting the coast this year. So, with me working by myself and 1,000 people on Long Beach, there's not a lot I can do. So, hopefully we can get more resources. Any questions?
Thank you, Kevin. Do you have, Marilyn, you want to start?
Thank you. Thank you for that report. Prior to this year and last year at every UBCM, we as council have lobbied for more police officers here on the coast. Just so you know, we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
It just being, with UBCM being virtual the last year and this year, we didn't have that opportunity, but hopefully next year we'll get back to that. And just a question, a while back we had a police officer on a mountain bike. Is that something that is maybe part of your regime that you could sort of, it made it feel more like you could see that person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 2 mountain bikes at the detachment. It is not easy to ride a mountain bike in 40 pounds of gear. So I walk a lot. But we have tried to get a grant for electric bikes, like the Parks Canada has, and hopefully we'll hear soon if we get that grant.
That would be great. Good luck.
Jen, I see you.
I'm just going to follow up on Councillor McEwen's comment about lobbying efforts. And if you are lobbying to try and get another member, would a letter from the district supporting that be something that you might require to, give it as much punch as you can give it?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing.
Jen, you want to make a motion and defer later?
You read my mind. I would like to move that we write a letter of support for additional members for the RCMP service in the district of Akula.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? A letter, please. Thank you. That's awesome. Kevin, did you want to mention about the non-emergency line and link to and such for those type non-emergent type calls?
Sure. So there's, if it's an emergency where it's someone's safety is at risk immediately, call 911. That goes directly to our dispatch in Courtney, who then radio us immediately. And then if it's a non-emergency, if you have a question, criminal record checks, lost property, things like that, you can call the detachment. That phone goes to the detachment. You might be put on hold because we have two public service employees answering calls, answering the front desk, things like that. But we will get to you, and they will let us know. And then also we have online reporting where you can go to the District of Akula webpage. They have a link there now, and you can click on that. And that's for anything that minor damage to your vehicle, lost wallets, lost license plates, things like that. You can report that online, and then that comes to us as well.
And while I have you here, I have one other question that we were talking about in the harm reduction and the alcohol policies and the drinking and driving. Brings me to, are we any further with having a roadside screening device for cannabis that was in trial phases? Do you have any update on that at all?
I know that there's been 3 devices approved, but they have to go through the court system and be approved through the Criminal Code of Canada. So right now we still go by physical signs and do the roadside test that way.
Awesome. And thank you so very much for this. And I know that you had planned on being here sooner. When will we see you next time? When it's raining. I
yes.
caught that part.
Yes.
So that will come for sure.
Our quarter ends this end of this month. So sometime in the next quarter in October, hopefully we can meet to discuss the further initiatives.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, one more thing. In regards to the last presentation, the liquor license, those come through me, and I can put whatever condition I think is relevant to the event. So I'm happy to sit down with council to think of different conditions that can go on that license. Usually when I approve a license, it'll have 10 to 15 conditions on it. And if we can come up with new and interesting ones, then
I think that would be great. So we're going to bring it back for conversation, and then we could probably put something together and work with staff and come up with your input and, like you said, some creative ideas on how we can do better moving forward.
thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, Carrie.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just on Kevin's point, we do have just so people are aware, I had to put it on pause for this summer, but we have a once a month meeting between both our CMP forces, BC Ambulance, Tofino, and UP, and then us around mental health and substance use. Part of that is around policies. RCMP in the past, when we started that meeting, were really instrumental in helping us advocate for a sobering and assessment center. Actually, Rochelle and her BC Ambulance crew too. So I just wanted to put out that I think we have a really good working relationship around this between our services. I think we all very intimately feel the same things around alcohol use. We don't want people in cells. It's very dangerous. Police don't want people in cells. BC Ambulance have their own challenges between them and the hospital, bringing people that are intoxicated. So it's something, especially alcohol use, that can kind of get us all at each other's throats. I think we've worked really hard to understand each other's roles and then help advocate for better services. So I just wanted to put out there that I think we're all on the same page and some. So I just thank those crews for their ongoing collaboration with us around these points.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. And Carrie brings wonderful pastries to these meetings, and quite often your detachment into Fino houses us for me. Anyways, it's fabulous, and we've done work together in the past. It's very enjoyable, and it's come a long way because Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're moving on to our third delegation. So we have the Surf Rider, Pacific Rim Surf Rider, and this is about cut the cutlery, amending the single-use plastic regulation bylaw. And is there live human? Oh, there she is. Hi there. Oh, she looks unmuted.
It's confusing because I have two different devices that are both letting me be here right now. Apologies for that. Would we also be able to get Amrita promoted as a panelist?
Absolutely. Just give me one moment, please.
Thank you so much. So many technical learnings happening right now.
All three of you should now be on.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Hello.
All right, ladies, you go ahead.
Awesome. I was wondering as well, we do have a presentation. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Feel free.
Wonderful. Why can I not do that? It's telling me I'm not allowed to. I'm not sure.
I'm just going to try and up your permissions. Give me one moment and I'll do it on both of your devices.
Thank you so much. I have one device where my camera works and the other one where my audio works. I can't have both, apparently.
Would you like to try to share your screen now?
Looks good. I think, can you see the presentation?
Not at all.
Yep, that's great, my dear. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Go for it, Amrita.
Great. Hi. So my name is Amrita, and I am the chair with Surf Rider Pacific Rim. And then Alice here, my colleague, and I'll let her quickly introduce what she does with Surf Rider Pacific Rim.
Yeah, I'm the youth coordinator, so I'm mostly working on the youth programming for Surf Rider, but I also manage the beach clean program as well.
Great, and so we're here today to speak to Council about adding cutlery to the single-use plastic regulation bylaws, Cut the Cutlery campaign. So you're probably familiar with Surf Rider. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what we do, but we are a powerful activist network of volunteers, and our goal is the protection and enjoyment of oceans, beaches, and waves for all people. Here with Surf Rider Pacific Rim, we have three main areas of focus that we like to look at. So ending plastic pollution, and that would look at things like this Cut the Cutlery campaign, or Straws Suck, or the Ban the Bag, other options or other things that we do, circular solutions for local waste, so looking for reusable options with takeout packaging, those kinds of things, waste diversion as well. And then finally, engaging youth, individuals, businesses, and government in ocean-friendly initiatives. So we've got our ocean-friendly business campaign that we run. As Alice mentioned, she's got her youth stewardship program that she does. And then, of course, I'm sure everybody has seen our tents for our beach cleanups as well.
Yeah, so here talking about plastics specifically today, most of our work is centered in some way around plastic pollution, and that's mostly because we can't avoid it here on the coast. Every time we go for a walk after storms in the winter, there's no ignoring the fact that we're in a plastic pollution crisis to the tune of 11 million tons entering the ocean every year. So that's about a dump truck's worth of plastic entering the ocean every minute. And the type of plastic that we're kind of used to seeing is the post-consumer industrial plastic waste. However, what's less talked about is the fact that plastic is really problematic throughout the entirety of its life cycle, starting from the extraction of the fossil fuels and the building blocks of plastic, which is incredibly pollutive, to the ethane crackers where plastic is actually made, which are disproportionately located in areas of marginalized communities and low-income communities as well. So plastic, even before it's been made into a product, is already polluting and making problems for our air, our lands, and our water. And then when you throw in the insufficient solid waste management and end-of-life solutions, which mean that we get about 9% recycle rates in Canada, we're very much dealing with a big plastic problem right now. And so one of the things that we've chosen to concentrate our efforts on for pretty much the last 6 years at this point is what we can do to address that. And so as a coastal community, we started looking at where this plastic is coming from. A lot of the things that we're finding on our beach cleans are single-use plastics, like cutlery. So plastic and bioplastic cutlery, we find them on pretty much every local beach clean that we do. You'll notice that bioplastic is listed as well as plastic, and that's because even though it's got this wonderful green name and it's bio, it's actually not compostable or recyclable. So it's one of those plastics, just like fossil fuel plastics, that eventually ends up in the water. It doesn't biodegrade. It breaks down into tiny, tiny pieces, becomes microplastic, enters the food chain, does nasty things to our coastal environments. And so we had to decide what we were going to do. We've kind of got this tried and tested blueprint. I'm sure many of you remember the straw stock and ban the bag campaigns that we launched back in 2015-16, working with businesses in a collaborative way to try and stop plastic pollution at the source, so prevent the amount of plastic that's being consumed, to reduce the amount of plastic ending up on our beaches. And so in the fall of 2019, we sought to add cutlery to the list of items that both of our districts that we work with has a regulation about. And so we started this process of collaboratively working with businesses, business community, as well as working with staff from both municipalities to look at a solution to cutlery consumption.
Great. So Alice mentioned the word collaborative, and I think that's really a key point here is that we really want our work with the businesses to be in a collaborative environment, and we strive to create this by connecting with the different business owners to have conversations with them about what this looks like. And it begins with even figuring out what they're using currently. If they're on bamboo or wood or plastic or bioplastic, finding out, some of the challenges that they have with using the different types of cutlery, and getting some feedback from them. And then as well, taking that feedback to the suppliers. So for example, there's a note here about the little wooden spoons not being very deep. So taking that type of feedback back to the creators of these products and actually being able to incite some change to make it more useful and ideally, make it easier for these businesses to be able to want to sign on to this type of program. So with that said, we consulted with various businesses. And I should say here that there's the numbers here of the business compliances. So just first taking a moment to see who was using what. And then as we launch this campaign, I will grab the next slide from you, Alice. Thanks. So as we launch this campaign, as I mentioned, we wanted to sit down with the various stakeholders. So one of those was the Community Economic Development Advisory Committee, which actually, funnily enough, at the time I sat on before my role here with Surfrider. So I was in this meeting when Lily Woodbury came and discussed the ideas that Surfrider had about using a deposit refund system for reusable cutlery, some of the feedback that we gave to her about maybe not making it an equitable playing field for other businesses. So with that feedback that we had from other businesses as well as from CDAC, we then redesigned the campaign with the following stipulations, and you can see those here: voluntarily eliminating plastic and bioplastic cutlery, supplying reusable cutlery for in-house staff use, offering locally compostable takeaway cutlery on request only, and that was an optional one. And as well, optional, maybe deciding to charge a fee for that cutlery. And there are, as we know, other businesses who do this with bags and coffee cups, which helps to desensitize the consumer, and maybe they'll remember to bring their own, and then as well for the businesses to help recoup the cost. And finally, as an option, maybe even selling something, like this, where we've got like a little bamboo kit that you can carry around with you. Handy little right there. Yeah, so I'm not going to spend all my time going, or all of your time going through the different business support here that we've done. Some highlights that I'll point out is that financially, Surfrider did offer I believe $400 of our fundraised money to businesses to help them swap off of plastic and bioplastic cutlery and replace it with wood or bamboo. We did connect as well with the Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, and 100% of those members came back saying that they would support a ban on plastic cutlery, as well as our community of ocean-friendly businesses who were also pretty excited about that idea. So the point that I really want to emphasize here is that we've had really great compliance already with the business community, more so than we saw with straws and bags when those bans were implemented. And I would like to go so far as to say that we're now changing the ethos or the philosophy of how you do business here on the West Coast.
Awesome, thanks, Amrita. Yeah, so I just really wanted to kind of emphasize that idea of culture change. We started campaigning on single-use plastic regulation 5 years ago at this point, and over the last 5 years, we really have seen a change in the culture. There's no other really a way to describe it in terms of what is acceptable and what it means to be a business owner and be a consumer as well, in terms of community and the expectation of visitors that are coming to the coast as well. The expectations for our guests and for our clients as they pass through our communities, which is really exciting. So in our efforts to move to a point where we are seeing less plastic going into the water, looking for those upstream solutions, working with community, working with business, working with institutions to shift that culture, and also working really closely with municipal governments, working with staff and creating these awesome bylaws and regulations to enforce the culture that we're seeing actually starting to emerge. So we are at this really exciting point. We just this year, we released our compliance report that we did on behalf of the districts as well, to kind of see how those bylaws are being enacted and taken up by different businesses and communities, and I think the compliance report is actually attached to the minutes here as well that we produced, which again has got really encouraging news to report in that as well. And we're really excited to keep going. I think that it's time and past for these unnecessary single-use plastics to be out of our lives, and it is very exciting to be on the leading edge. We know that the province is looking at us and looking at the work that we're doing in our districts, which is really exciting. And it feels really great to be doing this good work together. We are working on with businesses on other items as well. Currently, we've got our Take Back the Tap campaign, which is looking to eliminate single-use plastic bottles and litre. We're supporting businesses to move on to locally compostable options for things like ramekins and coffee cup lids as well. But we're super stoked to come here today and tell you that we feel like we're there for cutlery. So thank you so much for your time today, and we'd love to take your questions and continue this great work together.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Any questions? Jen, do you have any questions?
No questions, just thanks for the work you do.
No, I think thank you for the report. I like the business compliance, and that's great. You know, a couple businesses here and there, still with straws. But are they the same ones with bags, or the business? And anyways, never mind. You don't have to tell me. But no, I think that those are that feels good. And I know we don't make any decisions here right now, but how do we make sure that we bring this to a conversation in the next steps?
Council can just make a resolution or direct staff to bring a follow-up report to the next council meeting.
Can we do that? You guys, is there an appetite to bring it now to talk about it more?
I'd make a motion for to bring it forward to see about adding the cutlery to our single-use bylaw.
Start that conversation.
Second.
Yeah. Any other conversation about it? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. That's great. We're going to chat about it, and yeah, it'll be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, those were great. Fabulous meeting. We're moving on to 9, which is correspondence. And we have 4 correspondence items. Are there any items council would like to bring forward for discussion? Go ahead, Lara.
Item number 9.1, the letter to mayor and council regarding fireworks. I would like to make a motion. I was wondering if it was an interesting conversation to have, make a motion to bring this bylaw, the fireworks bylaw, to the next council meeting for discussion.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Anybody want to pull anything out also? Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn.
9.3, the virtual conference Living in the 21st Century, a senior strategy. Since I'm the only senior on this council, I thought maybe I should be the one that attended this. It looks really interesting, and I am available those 2 days if anyone wants to make a motion to send me to that.
I would make a motion to do that. I'd attend it, except that I have to work.
I was also wondering who is on the seniors hub now through the community center, that this would be an interesting thing to.
That's a good question.
Maybe have more.
Yeah, Miss Fortune, do you know who might want to and enjoy an extension of an invite to? So I'm already attending with another hat on. It's already in my thing. So,
I think she'd be best suited, really, if she's in it.
Yep.
Maybe say that out loud because Abby's not on a microphone.
So, sorry, go. You do it. No, you do it.
Abby mentioned that she was going to put Barb Gubbertson, because she is the part of the seniors hub, and she'd get a lot more information out of this and be able to take that back to the table.
There's a motion.
So if that's a motion, I'll second it. Any other conversation about that? So Marilyn, we're made the motion, second, and
Jen made the motion.
Jen made the motion. I'll second that Marilyn is going, and then so if there's no other conversation, all in favor that Barb gets the invitation extended and Marilyn is going from council, and I'll see you guys there virtually. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's happening. Anyone else want to pull anything else out that I can muck around with?
No.
No? Excellent. Okay. We're moving along. So that's correspondence. And we are moving along to our information items now. And we have 3 information items. Are there any information items council would like to bring forward for discussion? Marilyn first.
Thank you. 10.1, that's very unfortunate that we did not get that grant. So that's, it's not a question, it's just a statement.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to bring up, where was it? 10.2, the letter about this email is also on the Children's Center desk for the daycare, so they know about it, and so that's not at a board level now. So it'll be.
Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add or comment about the information items? Go
ahead. Thank you. 10.3. This is for new spaces for childcare, so it's not for adapting an existing daycare, but I'm wondering if we could apply for this as part of the rebuild at the schools.
So this is also on the desk. There's other things happening behind the scenes about new spaces for the Child Care Society too, but the school also has this letter as well.
So the school would be applying for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other follow-up? Okay. Seeing none, those are our information items. And that brings us to committee reports. We'll start with Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. September 7th, we had our Harbour Authority meeting, and we were presented the final draft of the Harbour Master Plan, which was very exciting. That's been a year or so in the making, and great to have that document now to work toward. September 10th, we met with the Minister of Tourism, Melanie Mark, as part of our UBCM minister meetings. That same day, we met with the Minister of Citizen Services, Lisa Baer. And on September 13th, we met with the Minister of Transportation, Rob Fleming, who used to be the Minister of Education, so we had a chance to thank him for the upgrades to our schools. Also on the 13th, I attended the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, AGM, a very exciting hour online, as you can imagine. And we didn't all attend, but some of us attended UBCM, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference, from the 14th to the 17th. The highlight for me was the keynote speaker, who was Rick Mercer. That was the best hour of the whole conference, absolutely. On the 15th, our Chief Financial Officer and I met with BC Assessment, and I think we came out of that meeting with a win for our budget process this year. And yesterday morning, I was on a Zoom meeting with the Vancouver Island Regional Library to meet their new executive director, who's Ben Hyman. And I just wanted to note, because they used to be one of my committees, the West Coast Multiplex Golf Tournament is this coming Saturday, September 25th. Which will conflict with the event that Lara's planning. Just a reminder for all you golfers out there. That's it for my reports.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Let's go to segue to Councillor Camps.
Sorry, I'll leave that. September 15th, I attended the West Coast Housing Focus Group, and we went through the preliminary findings of the report, which is quite interesting. It is also on page 75 of our agenda, which will be coming up next after our committee reports. On the 16th, I attended the Akula Tourism Plan, which we all shared our tourism experiences from the summer, and there was a whole bunch of stakeholders sitting at the table. And we understood where we were at with the development plan and provided some feedback. And the next, we're working with the Whistler Center for Sustainability, the District of Ucluelet, and Tourism Ucluelet, and a whole bunch of us stakeholders working in the industry. So the next point will be some public engagement. So we're really looking forward to that, having a lot of community members involved in it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. And Councillor Hoare?
All right, so some that have been mentioned, like Harbor Authority and ministry meetings. I also attended on September 8th the Wild Pacific Trails Society meeting, which was really interesting because it had a wrap up of the summer and their social media interactions and the work that the education coordinator had done over the course of the summer. It was interesting to see how many interactions, even during a COVID summer, she had over those 2 months, both online and in person on the trail. I also attended the UBCM. I agree, where Rick Mercer's hour was probably the best hour. There were some interesting takeaways. I always like the takeaways. The plenary panel on pathways to truth and reconciliation. One of the things that John Jacks from the Hewett Nation and the chair of the ACRD said was that First Nations are in the process of becoming what they should have been. And so that was a really thought-provoking little thing for me. Also, during a session on planning and growth, I discovered that California has recently passed a bill that allows up to 4 dwellings on single-family lots. So they have essentially eliminated single-family lots in California. And so that's going to be an interesting watch. My quote takeaway is actually from the fellow who was getting us all to Bhangra dance during the sessions for UBCM. And he said to be happy generously. And I think that is something that all of us need to do. And what else did I do? No, I'll finish with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, Councillor Hoare. That was I did not do the dancing in that little break session that we had. I hope you guys, did you dance around here or just you did? Good for you guys.
Hold on, I did. Why not?
I love it.
Get moving, right?
I love it.
We want to talk about coordination.
Snow points for that anyways. Okay, so aside from all of those things, we've had a busy time. UBCM was our second virtual one, which it's anticlimactic compared to our very first, well, you had been previous, but the live one that we did get to go to our first year, and keep the fingers crossed for the last year. Aside from those, the ACRD, Chair Jack, he spoke at the UBCM, and then there was a little bit at our meeting about the Truth and Reconciliation Day, and with meetings with ministries through the ACRD as well, with the health ministry, thanking a shout out to Island Health and thanking them for their support always. And Minister Osborne, a meeting with her with regards to getting more First Nations representation on regional districts. So that's some important work that's coming up. And then I had the housing need and demand study that we had on was that the 15th? I had it just previous to that at the Alberni Clackawanna Health Network, and a quick and dirty roll through of it with the Coastal Family Resource Coalition. So I'm pretty versed in our housing needs study, which has lots of information in it, as everyone can see. And the Berkeley Community Forest, the old growth strategy was a topic at the meeting, and 250 plus year old trees and kind of what our forest is looking like, and the mapping that they've done of everything that we have in inventory and the ages. And it's amazing the science behind how, while a tree is still standing without counting its little rings, how you can, and the species. And anyways, super interesting information. I think that's it for my additions to the committee reports. At this time, I would like to make,
I have a question for you.
Sure.
This was just announced September 17th, communities to receive new walking and cycling pathways connections. And the list of places that have received grants, I don't know why it's combined, but it says Banfield / Alberni-Clackawas Regional District.
Yeah, no, I'll ask because that doesn't, it wasn't, I saw your thing. It's not on my, so I'm going to ask. We have the West Coast Committee meeting and then is it tomorrow? I have the, so I'll get to the bottom of that.
So it's not for the section of the bike path?
Negative. That's not.
Okay.
No. I was going to now make a motion before we carry on with, we moved up 13.1 to go before reports, but could I make a motion that we take a 5-minute bio break? Anybody opposed? Perfect. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for the break. We are moving on to, we're going to go to 13.1, and that is in legislation. So Mr. Gregg, would you like to introduce this one for us?
Through the chair. Just briefly, having held a public hearing on the amended bylaw, essentially council is now in a position to consider and discuss the comments and submissions from the public that were made up to and during the hearing, and to now consider whether to move the proposal forward by giving third reading to the bylaw. This is bylaw number 1284, as it applies to lot 16 on Marine Drive. Third reading is commonly considered approval in principle, and as noted in the report, council has indicated that final adoption of the bylaw would be subject to the conditions that are listed on page 132 of your agenda, which are conditions A through K, and just also noting that J was made somewhat obsolete by changes to the proposal. So just briefly, as next steps, should the bylaw receive third reading, the applicant would need to register a Section 219 restrictive covenant on the property to ensure that those conditions, that list of conditions, are met. If there are any questions, I can attempt to answer them. Otherwise, I think this is a chance for council sort of discussion on the bylaw in the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Who would like to open up discussion?
May I just have a question through the chair to Mr. Gregg? So if we were to request a traffic assessment before, let's say, E and F, when is that to be asked for?
Through the chair, I think the as it has been indicated previously, that a traffic assessment is something that through the subdivision process would be part of that process, and that the applicant is anticipating that. If council were looking to insert that as a condition, I guess my first question would be whether the putting it in the covenant is to change the timing of that. So I'd sort of seek clarification if that's the intent.
No, I just wanted to know if there was a traffic assessment being done, and when do we see that before those roads are being put in?
Through the chair, it would be a requirement as part of the subdivision, because if the zoning were approved and they move forward to the subdivision, that would include dedication and construction of new roads, which would have to be meeting the municipal standards. We would require a traffic assessment at that time to ensure that those new intersections and new traffic movements would be safe.
So between now and subdivision, yeah. Same question. Jen, do you have some discussion you want to fire up?
Well, we heard a lot at the public hearing. Believe me, we heard you, whether you wrote in or you came in. We heard a lot of issues about density. We heard a lot about traffic. I understand Councillor Kemp's query about the traffic study. I'm glad that it will be done a little further along in the process. One of the main issues that we have, and it was not brought up by a lot of people, is the housing supply problem. People bring it up, but then aren't so happy about other parts of it. And I just, density is more sustainable than a whole lot of single family homes. And I appreciate owning a single family home, but as somebody who grew up in multifamily housing, who currently lives in multifamily housing, was lucky enough to get one when the prices were still low. Housing attainability is huge. And I'm going to quote from one of the letters that we did receive. And I just think it's something that I want everybody to think about. Consider the future of West Coast families, couples, and single folks who are looking to remain in our community and who require stable, adequate housing opportunities to support a more livable, sustainable region. We want to support a livable, sustainable region. So that's my 2 bits, maybe my 10 bits.
Marilyn?
I do think this proposal is going to solve a lot of housing problems because it is such a diverse mix of housing. And it's not going to just pop up overnight. It's going to take years to build it. So people that are afraid that they're going to see an extra couple of hundred people suddenly in town, it's not going to happen that way. It's going to be slow. And I think for that reason, I am in favor of giving this third reading.
I think during the public hearing, we heard a lot of, and I have the same queries, right, regarding community growth and infrastructure. And I think, and we are going to talk about that a bit today in 12.1 in the reports about just moving forward and having a separate discussion about it, because there's a lot to talk about. But I feel that this development would be better suited as part of our community, and it would be more community than a whole bunch more short-term rentals. And so that's why I would approve this development going forward. And especially now that we have more park dedication, we have a bigger green space, we've got a little bit more, right? And then also we have to talk about sidewalks moving forward. There's a lot of different things that we have to have a separate discussion for. A lot of things that have happened in the past that and it started to develop and we didn't think of those things, and there has to be a separate discussion about that. But I would approve the third reading.
And I think CMHC and the opportunities there with the apartment and the apartment density it's a big deal. It's something that we need to take care of the mix, the varying opportunities for, all different euclusions and such. So do we want further discussion? And is there any other, are we clear on all of the items and the recommendation?
I'm clear on it.
Marilyn? Yeah. Jen, I agree with everything everybody has said. Jen, do you have anything else to add?
Something I forgot to mention. I know people are concerned about that sort of density in the community, and my mother and I were having a conversation yesterday about the student housing that I grew up in, and it was a series of townhouses, not dissimilar to what I see on the, sketches, and it very much was a community. I played with the kids that lived in the other townhouses. I really think that our community needs this for young families, single parents who have trouble finding places. My mom was telling me tales of how hard it was to find a place when I was a child because they wouldn't rent to single families, single parent households. I know that things have changed, obviously, because it's been, 1 or 2 years. But just don't be afraid that it won't be a community, because it will be a community. And there are a lot of families that need that housing in our community already, and they're struggling. So,
thanks, Jen. All versions of this that we need and what we don't need is more short-term rentals. So at the end of the day, does somebody want to move the recommendation?
Everybody move it? Move recommendation 1 that council give third reading to District of Akula zoning amendment bylaw number 1284, 2021.
Second.
Any further comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, that takes us back now to reports. 12.1, and I think West Coast Housing Need Assessment. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, through the chair. Essentially, this is a project that I'll just briefly introduce Sandy McKay from Akula Development Services, who's going to give a presentation. But this is a project we're really excited about because it is a housing needs assessment truly for the West Coast, and that it's a joint project between the District of Tofino and Ucluelet and the Regional District and First Nations on the coast. That it really is looking at the region because it's or sub-region. The West Coast is one housing market, and in many ways one community with communities within it. So it's something we're really looking forward to, and this is a chance to sort of get some initial findings that it is intended to wrap up later this fall, end of October, early November. And I'll leave it there and let Sandy run you through the findings.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone. There you go. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me back to present to you again. I think the last time we spoke in this setting was to present kind of a similar oh, sorry. Can everyone see the screen? Just maybe a nod if you can see the presentation. Perfect, yeah. So I think the first time we spoke was just to present kind of the process and a bit about why we're doing this project. This is kind of the three-quarter way point where we've actually collected most of the data we're going to be collecting for this study, and we've been able to prepare some preliminary findings for you. So this isn't the final, recommendations or key findings. This is just kind of a summary of the data. And when I was there last week, I believe almost all of you have now actually seen this report. So this is just going to be the quick 30, 10 minutes. If you have further questions, you can I can go into details afterwards. And of course, if you want to talk further about any specific element, I'm happy to pick up the phone and chat with you in a different context this week. So, great. Again, reminder that what you can expect in this report is some information on local and regional demography, households, incomes, economy, and housing affordability. You can also expect to see some information that sort of personalizes or personifies that data. So we use that engagement feedback to conduct things like an affordability analysis, which gives us an idea of which income groups and population groups are struggling the most to meet their housing needs across the West Coast and in Euclid. You'll also be receiving some high-level policy recommendations. What's not in this report is kind of that next step. It's where new housing should go, the form or density it should take. That's up for you to decide how to act on that information in things like OCPs, zoning bylaw reviews, partnership development, community education, and development decisions, which is obviously something that you are already doing as a council. So that's great. Briefly, as Bruce said, the study area is all of the West Coast area, including Area C of the ACRD, which is quite large geographically, but whose population is relatively concentrated in the areas around Tofino and Euclid. And other partners are included, including Euclid Government, Euclid First Nation, Tloquid First Nation, and Toquat Nation, along with the District of Tofino. So it's a really broad partnership base, and I think we'll be able to make some key recommendations that leverage the different assets and strengths of each community for collective action. So jumping into our preliminary findings, I'll first start with a bit of population and household information. So the year that we have reliable data is 2016 for things like population. In that year, Akula had a little more than 1,800 people and about 740 homes. Our projections expect that in 2031, so in about 10 years, you'll have a little more than 2,000 people and about 900 homes, which actually represents a decrease in the number of people per household, going from about 2.5 people per household in 2016 to 2.3 people per household in 2031. That's tended to be indicative of an aging population. It's also indicative of changing family structures. So as our households and family structures change, we are finding that we need more housing for less people. Often now one family occupies 2 homes. And things like that. So it really is, we're starting to need more and more houses for less and less people. The rate of households is increasing faster than the rate of population growth in your community. And a lot of that population growth is actually coming from outside of the ACRD. We don't have specific data for Euclid. The census does not get into that granular amount of detail. But what we do know at the regional district level is that you've seen pretty dramatic increases in migration over the past 5 years. So in 2015 all the way through 2020, which is the last year we have good migration data, you've been a positive migration region, which is exciting. Your natural population has actually declined over that census period, so the number of people being born is not replacing the number of people who are dying or leaving your community. So this migration is key to continued growth across Akula, Tofino, and the rest of the ACRD. We also know anecdotally that most of this migration to the ACRD is settling in those 3 communities of Alberni, Euclid, and Tofino. You are the three major populations, or the three places where a lot of that population is moving to. So it's exciting to see, and I think that it's important to start planning for. We're also seeing across Euclid that your population demographics are changing. So in 2006, about 6% of your population was over the age of 65. And in 2026, so in just 5 years, we're expecting that number to be closer to 22%, so more than 1/5 of your community. Planning for seniors' housing needs, planning for seniors in general is going to become more and more important. I think that 22% is still relatively low compared to a lot of municipalities across British Columbia, and especially a lot of more rural and smaller communities across British Columbia. That number routinely I see is over 40%. So you are getting older, but there is time and ability to plan for that so that you can avoid kind of a crisis situation where we're seeing a lot of communities in that position right now. One thing to look at, though, is this kind of orange and green sections remaining relatively constant. So you have, across all three of these, you've got more than 50% of your community in those two population sections. That's kind of your working age population. That's when people are relatively not settled in their career, but have a really good idea of what they're going to be doing in their career, especially in this green. And they tend to be less mobile. So once people are in that career path, once they're over the age of 25, they tend to be less likely to be moving around. So that's great that you've got such a great young working age population. And here's the fun stuff. So let's get into this cost of ownership statistic. So across the West Coast region, across the study area, cost of ownership has increased dramatically in the last 10 years. This graph holds all of these numbers at consistent $20. So this accounts for inflation. Pardon me. Tofino's market, Euclid's market has actually increased the most of all of the communities in our study area. You started at a more affordable position than Tofino, but you are coming very close to their market position right now. Your price between 2011 and 2020 increased by 101%. So the average sales price doubled in the last 10 years. That's a really dramatic change, and that necessitates some, I think, policy intervention on behalf of on behalf of the local government, as well as necessitates some policy and funding intervention on behalf of the province and other senior funders. You can see that top green line, Tofino, only increased about 52%, but they started at a much less affordable condition than you did in Euclid. The average in 2020, which is one of the best data sets we have. Actually, we get yearly data for this kind of thing. The average home sold for around $600,000 in your community, which is up from a price of around $300,000 10 years ago. And it's not just an ownership model, or it's not just, and we can actually dig into what your different units sold for. The most expensive units in your community are obviously single detached, which went for around $700,000. Rows went for around $500,000. Semi-detached or duplexes around $400,000, and then your manufactured homes, when they are available, significantly less, but still quite expensive at around $200,000. So all different unit types are up. It's not just the more expensive single-detached homes driving this number, though they are the most expensive type of housing in your community. And it's not just ownership; rental costs are up across the region as well. I will give a shout out to Faye from the Coastal Family Resource Coalition, who actually collects this data on behalf of your communities. And she maintains a pretty consistent collection methodology, which is great. Most communities of your size do not have rental data to report. You would have to go to Port Alberni for the closest reliable rental data. So this is really exciting that we can actually share this with you. 3-bedroom rental units across the community Akula are the most expensive and have increased about 50% over the past 5 years. 2 bedrooms, again, up 28%, a little bit less expensive. And then the other types of units go on down. This is important because in our engagement, a lot of people were telling us that 3-bedroom units are what are needed the most, especially for young families who are in that sort of younger age category and are looking to start their families and live in Euclid permanently. So the last slide I'll share with you is core housing need, which is kind of a catch-all statistic for defining different core housing needs. It's a little bit strange to look at in Euclid. It's kind of a bit of an outlier, these 3 communities here. ACRD as a whole, we see about 7% of all households in core housing need, 3% of owners and 16% of renters. That's a very standard kind of model that we see. In Akula, however, it's a little bit different. 11% overall in core housing need, 9% of owners, and only 12% of renters. So in some ways, this is because of your relatively small sample size. Census Canada is not good at collecting information on communities that are less than a certain threshold, and between 1,000 and 2,000 people is relatively small for their collection methodologies to work. And it's very surprising for us to see that owner number and the total number are as high as they are. Typically, we're seeing something a lot more in line with what the regional district is doing. So to us, what this means is that likely a lot of your owners are overextending themselves to get into an ownership position, or they're purchasing more house than they need with the expectation that they can rent out some additional units as an income property. So that's probably driving some of this higher rates of owner and total core housing need. Your renters, I think in practice, this number is probably low. Probably more than 12% of your renters are in core housing need. But because of the way the census works, it's not overly able to capture, especially renter needs in such a small community. And I'll get to why we think it's a little under in a second here. So we were really pleased with the responses that we got from some of our engagement. We received more than 500 responses to our survey. And Akula actually took the crown with 239 responses to Tofino's 227. Of that data, we actually ask, does your current housing meet your needs? So it is a subjective question. It asks people to define their own needs and if their own housing does meet them. But 22% of all survey respondents from Akula indicated that their current housing does not meet their needs. We also asked what challenges people were expecting to see in the next 5 years. 42% of Akula respondents indicated they were worried about the cost of their mortgage or rent. 40% indicated they were worried about stability. Stability kept coming up as being one of the most important ones. People worried about their landlords selling their house or moving back into their house or turning it into a short-term rental. And about 39% were worried about the cost of utilities, which we've seen going up and up over the past couple of years. Guys, I'll pull out just read a couple key quotes from you here. This first one: there's a constant looming fear and instability living in this housing market, which takes a substantial day-to-day mental toll. I really appreciate this one. I think when you read as many of these responses as I have, this is the kind of thing that you see kind of pervading all of these comments, is that even if folks are feeling comfortable or feeling like they can scrape by at this moment, there is this kind of constant dread of losing your home, and you see that coming through in all of these written responses. It's really challenging and difficult to read at sometimes. This person here is saying they'd love to set down some long-term roots, but they've been playing musical chairs with housing rentals since living here. They pay $1,000 to live in a moldy converted garage because that's what you have to do in this town for housing. And this last one that I'll highlight here is someone indicating that they would like to see zoning pushed to allow for more multifamily homes and housing complexes, as well as some controls on short-term rentals and some investment in low-income housing, like the type of housing that's available through BC Housing and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. In addition, we did more than 20 hours of one-on-one interviews. Themes that emerged in that were, as you can expect, things like rental supply, a lack of available affordable rentals. In fact, rental supply was even a more important issue than cost. People saying that even if they couldn't afford it, they wouldn't be able to find it anyway, right? Workforce housing, so both for seasonal and temporary workers, as well as for kind of employees, that sort of resident restricted housing, people who are working in the tourism and hospitality sector who just cannot find a unit that supports them. The cost of utilities, development challenges. Obviously, development is really expensive in your community. Land is increasingly less available, and servicing costs and servicing capacity is a limitation. We also heard that electoral areas and local governments are not being set up for success by higher levels of government, more responsibility without increased funding and resources. And lastly, we heard that there's a need for a change in mindsets and maybe some stigma reduction around poverty and mental health and the relationship between those two. Housing is part of the system, and without addressing all parts of that system, you're really not addressing any part of that system. So that's it. Our next steps for this project are to complete our engagement analysis, draft up a report with the data and engagement kind of smashed together into one synthesized final document. We'll review that document with your staff, send it to design before coming back to you for, I believe you have to I don't think you have to approve it or accept it. You just have to like accept for information, I think is the correct terminology in the legislation. And then at the end of the project, we'll be hosting some capacity building sessions for staff. One of these things that we know is that this is going to be something you have to repeat every 5 years, and we're not sure if in 5 years the same funding program will be available. So we'll try to build some capacity for staff to take on this project themselves, or to maintain the data set that we'll be giving you in order to decrease the cost of hiring a consultant to do it again in 5 years' time. I think that's it for me. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. My email is there. Yeah, I know you've got a lot of sort of housing focused things in your agenda tonight, so I will leave it there. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them or to communicate further with you via email or phone in the next couple of days.
That's awesome, Sandy. Thank you. Does anyone have anything this is information we've seen, and thank you very much. We appreciate it and look forward to the next steps. We are moving on to report number 2, Akula Housing 2021 update. Bruce, Mr. Gregg, you're going to start this one also, please.
Thank you, through the chair. More housing. We felt this was timely, and we've tried to keep this to 8 pages, this report. I think it could have been 40. But really first, and I won't, I'll trying to sort of describe what we're seeking from council on this. And first, I guess we're asking council to confirm some goals. We're trying not to get too lost in the weeds of housing and a whole bunch of what ifs and possibilities here, but we wanted to focus first on the decision around those goals for now. But the report also tries to put the topic in some context, that really sort of looking at the bigger picture, sort of what's happening in the community and what's happening to the community to a certain degree. And also, we also wanted to note some of the actions that have been taken on more on the supply side, that there is, a number of things that have been happening around housing and development that are part of the context. And as well, although we want to really bring this forward at this point for council to discuss some of the goals, we also wanted to sketch out some details of some strategies that the town could pursue to have some tangible shape to it and to be clear on what could come in the future. So that said, the sort of 10 strategies that are touched on in the report and really sketched out, I'd say. One thing I'd note, and it doesn't sort of specifically call it out, but they are a range of short, medium, and long-term type actions. There's it does touch on sort of zoning and regulations and the changes that could be made. That's more short-term, I think. Building housing, also building capacity. Those are kind of the 3 categories they're in. Some of them could happen relatively quickly. And we're at a point in time where council could, and we're talking about in this council term, so within the next year, I think, could engage the community and potentially amend some of those regulations and bylaws that affect housing. And also to set in motion some medium and long-term actions to improve the housing situation in Uklulit. The other notes I would just touch on is that it's probably true that we're going to need all of the above, that there's no one thing where we can sort of just do this and we'll solve the housing situation. It's not that simple. It is a more complex and wicked type problem. So I'm happy to answer questions on any of the specifics in the report. We are suggesting to sort of move this forward, that council first confirm and focus on the goals, and then we would come back with other pieces if council wishes. And last couple notes I would say is that if there are items that council deems a priority, then having some indication would help us focus on those next steps. And maybe I could ask for the slides, the first slide, which is really just those goals that we've sketched out, because that might help to have them on the screen. And also noting in the options under timing that given that the housing needs assessment we've just heard from Sandy is underway and is going to be reporting back later this fall, it certainly is an option for council to set this discussion aside, if you wish, until that assessment is completed and sort of revisit it. But with some of them being timely, and so we're looking for some direction from council on whether you want to go down the road of looking at making some of these changes, particularly around the regulatory changes. And just given the time involved in the calendar of the year, we're looking to sort of start that discussion now. So on the screen now are the goals that are in the report on the first page. And might be a place to begin, but also I'd say if there are any questions about any of any of the items. I have some other slides, not sure if we need them, but if there are questions, I could certainly try to answer them.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, I was really intrigued with the section on building housing on district-owned lands and the 3 options that were presented there. So that would mean, because I get people telling me all the time the district should build affordable housing, and that's not really what we're here to do. But we could partner with a not-for-profit developer of some sort. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, it could take different forms, and that is one viable option, is to look at partnering with there are nonprofit housing developers, often with funding from senior levels of government. Things like BC Housing gets involved with that. And that's where that housing needs assessment can help identify what are the gaps that need that kind of intervention. Because the market can take care of some part of the housing spectrum, but there may also be gaps. There's a presentation earlier talking about the difficulty when Faye was talking about, shelter for youth. Well, that means some housing. Where is that? Who's providing that? That may be a piece. Seniors, single parents, other forms of shelter, and there's a whole range of things that it could be. At this point, those aren't identified, and that's part of why we're doing the housing needs assessment. Often those, very non-market types do need partnerships between different levels of government and nonprofits.
Thank you.
I don't really have any questions, but are you looking at for us to like kind of prioritize, like give a couple of like, let's start with these 2 kind of thing? Is that what you're looking for? Yeah.
Essentially what we're looking for is hopefully some confirmation of are we completely missing the mark with the goals that we've sketched out here? If there's something that jumps off the page and says, hey, I think that's a priority, that's helpful to hear as well. As I said, it's probably an all of the above approach over time, but if something is striking council as, well, we really think one of these is something we should do first, again, that's really helpful. And particularly timing. Some of them are going to take, you sort of get them started, but it's going to take multiple years to really get there. And will be ongoing efforts. Others are more like the regulatory changes are things that council has more direct control over. And certainly it takes time to adopt bylaws and have public input on them. And sort of we can get into the details of what that would look like. But yes, so to answer your question, if there's an indication of something that is a priority, that would be helpful.
I liked where it says, this is not to suggest that short-term rentals be banned. The zoning could acknowledge those existing licensed B&Bs, but contain their further spread. I really liked that, like to slow down and make them more of a long-term housing. And also the carriage houses or permitted accessory use on properties that are larger properties for carriage houses or second residences would be a good start. What do you guys think?
Jen, do you have some words you'd like to share?
Don't I usually? I'm sort of all of the above, but I agree with Councillor Kemps. The slowing the I love the word, but today I can't say it. Proliferation of short-term rentals, I think, is something that we need to be aware of. I'm also interested in the West Coast. The idea of having a West Coast Housing Authority, because there are some fundings that are available that I heard about at UBCM that actually kind of require there to be a housing authority that's, somebody that's separate from the municipal government, that a group that can apply for some of those fundings. And yes, I mean, I've said it before, there needs to be, I really am all of the above. I'm hoping that some of this can get incorporated into the draft OCP. That would be great. But I think we do need to figure out what Akula wants to be when it grows up.
Through the chair to Mr. Gregg, having a housing authority seeing one being used next door to us, down the road. And it's a very slow process, and I get that. There's a lot of red tape. And I'm trying to read up and educate myself about housing authorities and how funding options. But is there a way that just through the district or that we could still apply for that funding, or does it have to be like a housing authority that has to apply for that funding?
Through the chair, and I'm not sure exactly what the funding you're talking about is, but there's also some distinction to be made between a housing authority and a housing corporation. Mm. And sometimes you get housing corporations, which is like a development corporation owned by a municipality, who also act as their own housing authority, just to further confuse things. And so by housing authority, one of the things, like if we had some different regulations and say every development were kicking out a percentage of affordable housing units that were being turned over, housing authority can play the role of keeping the wait list, vetting and qualifying people, which is a very difficult and kind of fraught job of picking winners and losers. Well, how long have you lived in the community? Are you a local? Do you have a trust fund that you're hiding your assets in? That is not a job to be done lightly, nor is it one I'd argue that municipal staff should be doing. So that's where in the discussion in the report, it says that that's something that none of our communities on the West Coast are large enough to really have, or in the near foreseeable future will have the kind of volume or supply of affordable housing where we'd be doing that on our own, but collectively we might. So we'll look at a resort municipality like Whistler, who's been, having to deal with affordable housing for decades now, and they base theirs on models looking in other resort communities in the United States, where they have a housing authority that does just that job. They may also then have development, housing corp that's building housing. There's different models of it, but that's one of the missing pieces that is something that probably is more of a long term to get it set up and funded and rolling, as opposed to a sort of short do it in the near future.
But it's definitely a priority. Like if you start something like that now, it's definitely a priority, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now would be the time.
Now would be the time to start that. Like that would be added onto this list of things that, yes, we need them all the goals.
Through the chair, it's just, yes, there are sort of, there are short, medium, and long-term things, but definitely makes sense to start some of those that are going to take longer term. Might as well, the sooner we start, the better, because that will take a lot of, I think, discussion with other agencies, other elected officials, and building support for it. And some of those conversations have begun, but I think this is just trying to bring it into some clarity, I guess.
Another thing that I think that we should really put on the table is partnerships with our First Nations communities and ACRD and because there's a lot of land outside of our jurisdiction that we could partner with, and how great the relationships we're building right now, like just even move that forward. I think that would be something that I'd like to prioritize.
That's a big one. That's a big topic.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
I kind of feel like the housing needs assessment that we're working on as this big collective group is sort of a way to start that conversation for some of us.
I would be ready to move recommendations 1 and 2. So I will move recommendation 1 that Council adopt the following goals aimed at improving the availability and affordability of housing in the community. A, prioritize long-term residential housing. B, slow and contain the proliferation of short-term vacation rentals within residential neighborhoods. C, create opportunities for more diverse and new forms of housing with a priority on more affordable forms of housing. And D, create opportunities for the development of new rental housing.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And I'll move recommendation 2 that Council direct staff to further explore regulatory and development strategies to action Council's goals for addressing housing availability and affordability in the community.
I'll second that.
Anything left to add? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Does that work, Mr. Gregg, or you didn't want it narrowed down or in A first and C second and B, but the way it's presented is excellent.
Thank you very much for this.
Yeah.
It's a great start, I think.
So good. Moving on. Report number 3. Are we on 3? Yeah. 5-year financial plan, our meeting schedule. Hi there, Ms. Monteith.
Good afternoon, through the chair. Bringing to you today the 5-year financial plan draft meeting schedule. It is a draft, and it has evolved over the last few days, so I do have some changes that I'll go over in a minute. So in August, Council attended a budget workshop with myself and the interim CAO at the time. And during that seminar, we did discuss the idea of shortening the length of the budget process. So traditionally, we go through from December until May. This is a little challenging because we have a lot of projects to move forward and contractors to line up and staffing. And new initiatives are hard to start midway through the year. And actually, a lot of my colleagues are trying to pass their budgets now in December. For me, I find the assessed values they fluctuate a little bit too much. So my preference this year is to wait for the completed roll to come out at the end of December and see where we're at. So my goal is actually to shorten the process to the end of March. The win that Councillor McEwen was speaking of earlier with BC Assessments is that they're actually going to be able to do a presentation to our council during our budget process. So what they're able to do is come in and talk about the trends and some predictions that they might have for our community. And we both came out of that feeling pretty positive about how it's going to help our budget process potentially. In terms of the process, we've practiced going over projects and operations and a review of both those with any new items in the taxation request. And then, of course, we go officially to the public input period, but we, of course, take feedback at any time. And then we go through the regular process, and we've been through this a few times now. Most of us have been here for 3 years now, so it's becoming more and more refined every year. I just wanted to direct your attention to the actual schedule, because this is where the potential changes come in, on page 106. So we have an opportunity, if you'd like, to combine the November and December meetings because we've kind of been through this before and our projects are already in the 5-year financial plan and have been adopted. So I would feel comfortable combining those together into a December meeting if you'd like to have one last meeting, because there shouldn't really be anything particularly new. It should be just reviewing what we already have and hearing a couple of new items and making decisions from there. And with operations, as you know, we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room next year in the core budget. So I think there's an opportunity to streamline some of this and see how we do. And then, of course, the last 3 meeting dates have changed. So what happened today was Joey and I and our CAO were able to look at the proposed schedule that's coming up for our regular council meetings and try and make it a little more efficient for you. So the last 3 meetings that we had proposed are now March 1st, which is a Tuesday, which will be a meeting following the Harbor Authority meeting if it's approved. And then we would tag on and within the agenda of March 15th and March 29th, which are still tentative, but it puts it all together in one package, and then we would have it adopted by March. And the other thing that Mr. Lawrence was bringing up today is we don't actually need to have you make a motion to approve this if you like. You can just agree that the schedule works for you, and we would post it on the website. Then if we did have to make a change, if something happened, we wouldn't have to come back to council with another report. We could just advertise the new date. So that might be easier for you as well. Questions?
Thank you, Donna. Do we have any objections to just accepting that this is great and we don't have to motion it and then we can tweak it if we have to later? I think we all agree to that. Donna, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for, I'm sure, the dates were, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Report number 4, District of Akula Water Treatment System Upgrade Project.
Through the chair. I'm going to be providing this report in conjunction with our new Director of Engineering, James McIntosh. So a little bit of background. In August, the district received a grant for more than $7 million from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program's Green Infrastructure Stream for the water treatment project. That's a mouthful. This grant is anticipated to cover about 73.33% of the project's estimated cost. The estimated costs are at about $9.6 million at this point. And now I'm going to turn it over to James to lead us through some of the project details.
Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me. Through the chair. The District of Akula draws water from 2 sources, the Lost Shoe Aquifer, which are wells, and Mercantile Creek. Akula's drinking water is compared against criteria defined by 1. Guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality, 2. The Drinking Water Protection Act. Specifically, at each source, testing shows the problems are 1. Mercantile Creek has turbidity and organic material. 2. Lost Shoe Creek Aquifer has iron and manganese. To be clear, these are the causes of brown water. The district has received feasible options to bring the 2 sources into compliance with the Drinking Water Act and the Guideline for Drinking Water Quality. The district has received a feasible engineered solution for each location as follows. 1. Mercantile Creek is to receive a newly built water treatment facility located at the Bay Street Pump House. 2. Lost Shoe Creek is to receive a newly built water treatment facility at the current well location. Both facilities will be supplemental to the existing stations, and they will vary in functionality to correct their specific water source problems. I'll share some details. 1. Mercantile Creek will use membrane filtration to reduce turbidity, soda ash to reduce corrosivity of water, coagulation to assist filtration of organics, and fine screen materials to remove particles. 2. Lost Shoe Creek will use chlorine addition for oxidization of iron and manganese, filtration absorption for iron and manganese removal, and ultraviolet disinfection for organic material. In addition to these upgrades, a new water reservoir will be installed to increase the district's water capacity by 1/3 and meet long-term water demand projections. These received feasible solutions, along with the awarded grant from the Approving Canadian Infrastructure Program, open the gate to further develop and implement an engineered solution to improve and make Akula's drinking water compliant with current Canadian standards. I will now pass it over to my colleague, Joseph Rodenberg, Manager of Corporate Services, to address legislative next steps.
Thank you. As Council, I'm sure, is aware, they gave the loan authorization, or loan authorization bylaw 1268. So Council gave loan authorization bylaw 1268/2020 3 readings before we applied for this grant. It was a precursor to doing so. The authorization bylaw is for up to $2,560,320 over a term of 30 years. Staff are now working to confirm that the estimated project costs remain the same. After we're able to confirm that, we can bring the loan authorization back to Council, at which point we'd be looking for a motion to submit that loan authorization bylaw to the municipal inspector or the inspector of municipalities, and to determine whether Council would like to proceed to how Council would like to obtain electoral approval. With a loan authorization bylaw of this size, you need electoral approval. There are 2 ways to do it. The first is through assent voting. That's a referendum. And the second is through alternative approval. So to be clear, the next step here is for us to confirm costs, make sure this is in fact the right amount of money we're applying for, and it's the right strategy for getting that money. And then for council to provide direction regarding how they would like to get electoral approval. And we think we should be able to do that in relatively short order. Are there any questions that the Director of Engineering or I could answer in the meantime?
Jen, you have anything? Nope. So good. Moving on. It's just so exciting, and yet we're just moving on. Another rogue motion, anyone? Now we are off to Report 5, District of Akula Signing Authority. Mr. Rotenberg.
Through the chair, Mr. Lawrence started with the District of Akula in late August. He's our new Chief Administrative Officer. It's typical for Chief Administrative Officers to have signing authority for documents, for example, contracts. Typically, there's a signatory that's a staff member and a council member, so typically the Chief Administrative Officer and the mayor will sign documents like this. What we're looking for today is a motion from council to clearly specify that Mr. Lawrence is designated with such authority.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll move recommendation that council delegate District of Akula signing authority to Dwayne Lawrence, Chief Administrative Officer.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Excellent. Sign away, Dwayne. And report 6, regular council meeting schedule change. Mr. Rotenberg.
So this one's pretty straightforward as well. We received a request to move the October 26th regular council meeting to the 25th. This would allow for more travel time to the Bahia, I think it's called State of the Island conference, which would be happening starting on the 27th. I understand that most council members may be available around 5 p.m. on the 25th. We would need a council motion to reschedule this regular council meeting because it is a regular council meeting and we'd have to give notice in accordance with the rules.
I'll move recommendation 1 that council reschedule the October 26, 2021 regular meeting to October 25th, 2021 at 5 p.m.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So very briefly, we track resolutions of council that have corresponding actions. Every time we complete one of those actions, it comes off the tracker. So anything that's completed on there would have been completed since you last received the resolution tracker. This is an information report, so if there are any questions about the ongoing actions, I'm sure that myself or the remaining staff members will do our best to answer.
Does anyone have any questions, concerns, queries about the resolution tracker? No. Seeing none, thank you for the information, Joey. And I think same thing goes with the checklisting. We have this information, and does anyone have any questions, queries, concerns? Seeing none, another piece of information. Thank you all very much. And now we're going back to the other pieces of legislation that we already dealt with 30.1. So now we're District of Akula Harbor Authority Amendment, bylaw number 1296, 2021. So that's the second piece of legislation. And I believe Director of Parks and Recreation, Ms. Abigail Fortune, will present this report.
I will, thank you. As council is aware, at our Harbor Authority meeting on September 7th, this was brought forward for you to have a look at. So it's the mortgage rates. And it's on your screen there. So if you, just a reminder, Paula, could you make that a little bit bigger if possible? Because my glasses are only working so well. The big thing with this is that we're just moving this forward as an and this ultimately will be an update for an amendment. The big changes, as you're well aware, are the annual reports. Annual mortgage fee rates, and we did, as per Councillor Hoare's request, look at the annual bump for charter vessel operators. So the $60 is reflected in the new list. The rest are pretty on par with what I showed you on September 7th, but just for the general population, what we did look at was we looked at Ucluelet, Tofino, Campbell River, Port Hardy, and Port Alberni. When we looked at these rates, that's what gives you the island average. We did establish a semi-annual rate last late spring. And so as we look through the rates, what we're recommending is under the amendment category. And just a reminder that we kept the semi-annual as they were. We adjusted slightly on some of the dailies as they show. And a lot of the monthly we looked at creating, for example, under recreational vessels, high. What we did, instead of doing the monthly at $18, we looked at it more on a quarterly level. So a lot of what we did was moving things down to a quarterly level and establishing still Ucluelet's rate for the monthly. We're one of the few organizations on Vancouver Island that actually offer this many. Most places just offer 3 or 4. And any questions?
Ladies? Jen? Nope.
No questions, but I'm happy to move the motion forward.
Sounds great.
I will move that Council give District of Ucluelet Harbor Regulation Amendment Bylaw Number 1296, 2021, first, second, and third reading.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Excellent, thank you. And now we're moving on to notice of motion, nothing there. Is there any other business? Seeing no other business, we are moving on to question period. So this is an opportunity for public to ask questions, speeches, representations about bylaws that were subject to a public hearing are not permitted. Are there any questions from the audience? Ladies? And Joey, are there any questions via Zoom or the telephone?
There are no hands raised via Zoom.
Lovely.
There are also no callers calling in at this time.
Is there anyone out there? Have we received any questions via emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
No, we have not.
All right. So on that note, we are having a closed session schedule. So could I have a motion to close this meeting to the public, that the meeting will be closed to the public in order to address agenda items under Section 91C of the Community Charter related to labor relations or other employee relations?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any other question? Any other discussion? No, we're moving into camera. All in favor? Closed session. We're now going to take a short recess while the clerk prepares us for a closed session.
See you in a minute.
And perhaps a bio break while we're at it.